part is the video is on.
Huh.
I actually have to go into my settings. So I was using another camera last time. Or you know what I could do is just plug that camera back in because fuck it, Merca. Yeah, yeah. Cool. Careful. You don't want to irritate me too much. Might have to get a little angry with that metal rod in that leg. Boom. Camera. Yeah, it's still registering my other camera, so I had to plug it back in. Mm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know you want me.
Hey, nice to meet you, man.
How's it going, bub?
Doing good, bro. How about you?
Living it up, getting irritated with Horizon Zero Dawn, trying to figure out some DLC
Oh
stuff on
man.
here, and it's not working.
Oh, that's always fun.
All right, fuck it, fuck it.
That's why I just stick with Xbox, man.
Uh, I have everything probably underneath the sun.
That's good. No.
PS4, Xbox One, PC.
Whoa, what do you play on PC? I play on PC. I play a lot of stuff on PC.
You know what I play on PC? Flight Simulator. That
Okay,
is it.
fair enough. Fair enough.
That is absolutely it. I don't know. I hear
I
my
can.
tunes in the background.
I'm refreshing now. Should be able to tell you in a second. I don't have anything on the page. Uh-oh. Alert.
What's up, everybody? It is DS Claw, and I am here on the Team F.I.N.O channel. And tonight I'm going to be joined by Bub Drub,
Hello, everybody.
Kira Carey,
Yep.
and your one and only. And tonight we're going to be talking about some crazy concepts such as Bionics from video games to reality. Now, when I was coming up with this concept, I was in search of other people to kind of talk about, because if you're living in a vacuum and just hanging out with yourself, you're alone with a crazy person. I'm a firm believer in that. And I like to talk crazy with other people. So I wanted to see what everybody else kind of had to pitch in on this kind of topic. Because while I was searching the internet for some Metal Gear Solid kind of stuff, because it's a cool story and I really dig it, I ended up coming across a story about Konami and this kind of like PR stunt that they did, which was to build a bionic arm, and they were actually going to put it on an amputee. And a gentleman ended up winning the contest, and he got suited for it, and everything was kind of going to plan, but they were trying to rush it too much, and it didn't really function the way it was supposed to. But a lot of the concepts in it were really solid, and it got me thinking about the parallel between reality and also what is really going on in kind of life, real life, and the sensor technology and how everything has kind of evolved from people with just like straight up hooks and peg legs on their hands and shit. And so we've kind of all gotten a little bit of taste of that, and I just wanted to talk about it and see what other people's take was, because I was thinking about that shit at about 3 in the morning, and I started getting a little off in my own head. So how is everybody tonight? Let's start there.
Good. Doing good. I got wine. I'm hanging out with you lovely gentlemen.
Fantastic. Oh, what do we got going on there? So, I guess I'll go to that. The the overall concept for me was a kind of interesting deal because I started really thinking about other things that was going on within that article, and it really started getting me questioning at what point do we stop being people? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because there is a definitive line where we start augmenting ourselves so much that what at least what I associate with being human isn't necessarily what everybody else associates with being human. So is being human having legs and arms and being able to feel that kind of tactile sensation, or is it the soul that makes a human a human? Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it makes sense to me, man.
Yeah.
I don't think any number of certain number of digits or appendages determines if you're human or not.
Okay.
I think there's my personal belief is it is a soul sort of thing. So, but with I guess it depends on how advanced you're getting with these bionics, and to what point do you lose a part of your soul because you've lost so much of your physical self. If that makes sense.
I'm tracking. In the article, he gets into how those sensors that are in the arm, and then later on there's like some TED Talk stuff, and there's so much crazy things out there. Like I didn't know we were that far along. Like I thought prostheses were still really kind of rudimentary and crude, but they're getting to where they're actually getting like fiber mesh fabric that's embedded with electronics so that it feels any kind of slight variation or sensation, and it'll cause the prosthetic that's motorized to move. And they're mimicking like actual rotations of ankles and stuff like that, those really fine motor movements that I take for granted. And it really it's come so far that they're talking, one of the guys was talking about at some point he thinks within this century that we're going to be able to put wings on people to take flight and be able to actually control that utilizing the muscles in their back and their shoulders. So like some real Leonardo da Vinci kind of, we're going to be Superman kind of stuff. And that got me tripping, man. Because if everybody's special, right? If everybody has this superpower, then nobody's special, right? That's just kind of the nature of the beast, because that's normal then. So if we really do see that transition of where people are augmented and start going into kind of like that cyborgy self, that bionic self, what do you think that there's going to be like a class division where people that are vanilla people and have all their limbs like just that they're born with? Do you think that there's going to be like a class divide between them and the augmented?
At first, I don't really know if they would be, but I do see, thanks to human nature, yes, absolutely. You're going to have a segregation in there, and it's going to get pretty nasty. Or maybe you can rise above that and not make it as nasty, but there's always going to be that unaccepting towards people. They're going to see you as not a natural. You're not natural. You're not like the rest of us. You're not normal. And those who are augmented, naturally, you're going to have stronger arms. So, may lead to the question of, are we the next generation and evolution of mankind?
Okay.
If we're augmented.
You were going to say something, Bub? What do you got?
No, I mean, I totally agree with Kiri there about that. At first, I don't think there will be any division, but as with anything different that the human race as a whole cannot generally grasp or understand, easiest thing is to create that divide. That's just human. I mean, history always repeats itself. So
Yeah.
um, so that's what I'm basing my opinion on. Is like history's always repeated itself. You know, with segregation from way back in the day to something as forward thinking as this with the augmented humans with wings or arms, legs, whatever the case may be. At some point, what people don't understand is usually driven by fear, and that fear leads to some sort of, I don't want to say hate mongering, but will lead to a division. So
Okay.
Yeah. Best actually example I can give of that is was it Deus Ex?
Deus Ex, like yeah, that's what I was about to bring up.
There's a lot of division in there. I mean, I recently just started playing the second game, and I'm going through a train tunnel, and there's an area that's completely caged off with barbed wire fences and heavy metal bars for augmented people that use a train. I mean, you could definitely tell how. There's kind of that like fear factor there because now an augmented has to fear for himself because this is what he gets treated like every day. This is what he has to go through. He has to constantly get scanned. Has to send his ID everywhere. Has to carry around documentations. These are my augs. These are what they're from. This is where I got them. Here's what they're able to do. And then you have to have license for essentially your arm that you lost.
No. So you're saying that it could potentially lead into like registration of all augmented bits that you have.
Yeah, and then is that not degrading to your identity? Is that just messing with your rights as being a human? And then next thing you know, people are going to ask, are you technically human anymore? Will you get mistreated differently?
I think I would agree with Bub and on that people fear what's new, regardless of what it is, whether it's skin type or whatever's going on. And I've seen that a lot of people, and I've noticed it and I'm not a saint by any stretch of the imagination. There's always that first couple minutes of, do I talk about it? Do I address that they're different, or do I pretend that I don't notice that they might have an appendage or a prosthesis that's different? Like, there's that moment of uncertainty on my part of like what's disrespectful, like bringing it up, And I think that once it becomes so, like the Cyber 2077 ad that we keep seeing, where the female has like the missing lower jaw, which is freaking awesome, by the way. And then like the eyes, like, do you bring it up, or at some point does it become so commonplace that you're just like, whatever, and just keep rolling? And I think that us as humans, I think that we have the ability to really adapt to whatever our surrounding is. Like if you're in something long enough and that becomes normal, then you just don't give a shit, and that's like, okay, it blew up, cool, right on, like keep moving.
Yeah, right.
And I think that is a redeeming quality about us as human beings. Like not too long ago, maybe like 40 years ago, interracial couples was like a super taboo thing. And I was talking about class struggles and stuff like that. We were talking about India and the caste system, and it got me thinking. Like in the supermarket, I passed like 4 or 5 interracial couples, and I was like, that would have been unheard of. People would have freaked the fuck out and been picketing. Like it's cool how far we've come. We've still got a long ways to go. I'm not saying we're perfect, but it's going to be amazing where we end up with those prostheses. At what, like, let's say, worst case scenario, I get blown up right this second. I get hit with a car bomb, or I get ran over, or I fall like hiking and bust all my shit up. Let's say I'm a quadriplegic, or should be a quadriplegic, but we have the ability via Bionics to be able to kind of increase those different points, or for me to recover my limbs. How far can I go before we enter a Ghost in the Shell kind of scenario? Are you guys? I know, Kira, you are. You're familiar with Ghost in the Shell. Are you familiar with Ghost in the Shell, Bub?
I'm familiar, but can't say like I know enough about it.
Okay, so
To
pretty much it's
like,
just the person that is the major focal point of that is called the Major, and she's a brain encapsulated within a robotic body. Like the only thing that's organic of her is her brain.
okay.
Now, does she still constitute as a human being, or has she like essentially transcended that?
Well, if we're going down that route, I mean, the whole situation with Ghost in the Shell alone is probably, in my opinion, one of the most stickiest situation with augmentees that's possible because she's a full-blown augmentee who was given the body through the military. So is this it's a question they actually have within there. If anybody ever watched this series, one of the best episodes you'll ever see is called The Laughing Man. And the Laughing Man actually asks this question: are we still human? Do we still have a soul? Even though we are 90% machine now. Does that make us still human? Do we have purpose? And when do our bodies become ours and start becoming property of the government, property of the taxes for replacing the limbs, for giving us this ability? My freedoms are no longer mine anymore. I'm at the whim of whoever owns this body.
Okay, so you're saying that it becomes like a property issue where they could revoke, like, let's say, your right to have in your body.
Well,
Or
take
if they're
a
going to get out of the
Kusanagi.
military, they got to turn it over, right?
Well,
Because it's
that's what the
property.
problem with Kusanagi was, or the Major, was she was trying to leave active duty military, but they couldn't because they own the body. So you belong to them. So if it was a normal person that's taking away the freedom of will
So
and the freedom of choice.
So I guess it boils down to does a just a brain constitute as a full-fledged human being?
yes, because there's still active thought going on and stuff. There's just no
Yeah.
like finger to
But they're-
finger kind of deal. You know what I mean? There's no
Right.
But that's also the main question they have in the series too. So we have a brain that constitutes as a human, but do you still have a soul? And it's a big question
yeah.
in there. Yeah, like
You can go
it's a
down
good
far
question.
down the rabbit hole there.
Okay,
that-
so
it
I'll
goes-
back it up a little bit. I'll back it up a little bit. So we have athletes today that operate at above average efficiency, whether that's football, basketball, running, all that. And we see those kinds of groups go into that fear mode that you were talking about earlier. There was a lot of marathoners that for the New York Marathon that really became active and outspoken about how people with prostheses, like those really springy ones that kind of like curve back, how they shouldn't be allowed to actually officially win the marathon because they weren't exerting the same amount of force or endurance as somebody that was not augmented. So is that something like
That is a tough call because I see both sides of it, right? From the other participants that are without a prosthetic. Yeah, they've worked hard, they've trained a very long time to be able to do this marathon or compete in this event, whatever the case may be. But on the flip side, you have someone that was perhaps in an accident, tragedy came into their lives, they lost their their legs, and they have these prosthetics that would allow them the mobility that perhaps a normal and non-prosthetic wearing person may take for granted, and all they want to do is compete and be just like everybody else. But they may be getting a advantage that a person that's trained for a long time is not able to get. So it's this weird dichotomy of, well, do you neglect someone because they have a tragedy and they have a prosthetic for it, or do you say, hey, marathon person without a prosthetic, yeah, all your training doesn't, whatever, all for naught, because we're gonna let these folks with prosthetics compete and they have an advantage over you. So sad, too bad for your training. So I wouldn't want to make that call.
it's a really hard, like it's a hard call. Like I 100% agree. Like I don't know if there is
I don't want to be that guy.
just like you were saying, there is two sides to that coin. So then we start seeing like the Paralympics pop in, where people of similar augmentation or things like that can compete with a peer group that has the same, whether it's a benefit or a hindrance, but it's same. It's individual versus individual. You know what I mean? And we start seeing those offshoots of different sports and different events like that. And
I mean, do you think we'll get to a point where we'll have a separate subsection of Olympics for sports or whatever, for like enhanced human football league, or whatever the case may be,
I think we're already
to
seeing it.
cater to that?
I think we're already seeing it. I think we're living it, but we don't really, because it's not the popular thing, or it's not something that's advertised on ESPN consistently. I think it's something that we take for granted.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you had something?
I think we're right on that. Yes, we're gonna start seeing it because you can't just write them off. I mean, I understand these other athletes; they do train hard, extremely hard. I trained hard in my previous job. Now I don't run worth crap anymore. But these people didn't have a choice when they lost something, and they have to learn essentially how to rewalk. And it's very hard to have something inside your body or that's there that you can't feel anymore, but you got to figure out how to make it work.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I understand with these athletes. Yeah, it's okay. Sure, they have an unfair advantage, but how long did you train for versus this guy may have been training forever, lost everything, and then had to relearn all over again.
Right.
So, to the other athlete, my question is, who's got it worse? Who's training harder?
Mhm.
Now, there are some advantages there. Yes, maybe having a division for them, maybe it isn't a bad idea. But
Well,
at the same time, we're going to that segregation that we were talking about now.
see, and that's where I think that's a subtext to what Bub was talking about earlier, and that is, it's a difficult call to make, for one, of saying yes or
Hmm.
no that you can do this, but two, making those individual kind of sub branches and those subcategories. I think is going to inevitably happen. Where if it's W amputee and they're running with both spring legs, then that's one kind of course, and then
Yep.
people that are wheelchair bound, that's another course. But I truly do think that we're already seeing those offshoots happen. We have Paralympics going on. I passed a wheelchair friendly, and they actually promote it, and they do it one night a week for their basketball league at a bar here, where people can get out on the court and they can roll,
I've seen that.
and they can throw down. And the cool thing, that the factor there that I think is really appealing, is that it's open to people that can walk normally also. So they have wheelchairs there on standby. So if somebody wants to participate in the game, they're
Hmm.
allowed to hop in one of the loaner chairs and roll around the court too, so that they can still have those full robust teams and everybody can get that opportunity to play together on an even keel. And
And that's a
I
cool
think
idea.
it's
I like
something
That is
that,
cool.
whether we are cognizant of it or not, I think it's happening, man. And watching those videos and stuff, it's really exciting for me.
I'm actually pro on it happening. I just hope that we don't abuse it
Which goes
because
back to
that's
oh man, I don't know. I see, this is like a turnaround thing, because then we get back into, I'm excited for when it happens. I've known soldiers that have gotten shit blown off, and they are just never going to be the same again. That's is what it is. But had they
Mhm.
had the access to MIT's technology that we saw in the TED Talk videos, where they had those electromagnetic fibers and being able to incorporate their actual nerve endings into the system, and those people are walking like there's not a prosthesis, and in their head, they don't have that mental separation between there being a missing limb and their prosthesis. It's that is their
Mhm.
leg, that is their arm, because of how it reacts subconsciously due to those nerve endings. And they would still, my friends would still be in the military now, and but when that 20-year letter came, they have to give that up, and what would happen then? because then they have to suffer that loss not once but twice, because then they have to go with whatever's out in the private sector.
Right.
Yep.
And I think whether we're talking about MIT, which is not a military or government ran deal, but it's its own place with its private technology, and they're not going to let that shit just walk away. I think we would see a lot of private industries kind of hoarding their tech.
Well, hoarding it and figure out a way to make lots of money off of it.
Fact.
That's capitalism. That's
finest, baby.
That's America, man. That's what it is. Hoard your ideas and your technology till you have a solid business plan in place to go buy a boat.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, best option to have is be from a foreign country, steal the plants from them, and take back at your factory.
I think it would turn into like the days of Prohibition. I think you'd end up seeing a black market flourish, and I think you would see a lot of that happening under some really shady conditions out in the middle of a shop somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And getting dirty implants.
But I think that would be just an initial response to a need for this. I mean, I guess it becomes, as time progresses on, what the prevalence of the want and need for these sort of enhancements are. Yeah, there's a need for it for folks that have been, hurt, or disabled in action in war or accidents, whatever the case may be. So yeah, there's obviously need for that specific sort of population. But at what point capitalism looks at it and says, well, we could start doing this for people that just wanted it, and then that side of the market takes off, and then you have the Amazon Prime Day
get your brand new
special bionic arm. It's gonna happen, man.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, it's gonna get to that point of just like anything else. I mean, look at cell phones from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Now you
is it wrong? I gotta. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Have them. No, they're everywhere. You can get them at 7-Eleven. Just go to a convenience store. Hey, I need a big gulp and a cell phone. 30 years ago, that wasn't going to happen. But it's the same sort of thing with this, I think, where once it becomes more prevalent, more established, you're going to see it everywhere.
We've got a question in the chat. Big Papa says, he says, would there have to be a limit on strength like in grip, or would it be like superhuman? And I think that would be interesting, because then you really would see government regulation pop into deals.
Oh, for sure.
Because a guy that can carry one Coke can and another dude that can rip the hood off my car, that's very different.
Yeah, I mean, but that also goes to my question. What's considered superhuman, though? Because, I mean, look at the strongman competition. Half these guys are pulling freaking planes.
Right, well, I think it's going to be varied upon the individual's strength. So if you have a dude that's 120 pounds soaking wet, he's not going to be able to pick something up with one arm that's 500 pounds. I think that's out of the realm of what I would think would be normal. But yeah, but who am I to say that, right? Who am I to say what the limit should be, or what the regulation should be?
I mean, that's only my question, because humans they surprise me all the time with how resilient we are and what we are really capable of.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, do we really know the limits of ourselves?
Oh.
And then you have a machine that does have limits. So how's that going to
Okay, so Miss J brings up, now if they're our military or police force, does that mean that when they check in, they get their strength? So I think that if we did see a standardization of those kind of deals, we did have the regulations in place, then I think it would be inevitable that you'd have to come up with a counter team, right? Because if somebody is all doped up on meth, but he happens to be 75% augmented, there's going to be some issues with the normal police officer taking him down.
I mean,
So
I
there
got
has
one
to
way
be
to
a
solve it.
reactionary force that would, I don't know if they would sign waivers saying, yeah, I'm down. Like, you go chop chop, give me some new arms, and just keep my other ones on ice until I'm done with duty. Um, what
How
would
long can
that
you keep
look
it on
like?
ice though? Like how long could you keep the arms on ice? And that's where my question is would we abuse the system? Because I am all down for people having augmentees if there's a tragedy or something, maybe you lost a limb, at least try to get your life back. But when somebody starts voluntarily giving up their limbs, that's kind of questionable. You know, I have to question that as to why are you wanting to do this? And on
Well,
top of that, going back to governing the strength and whatnot, how would you do that without plugging it in or something like that? If you can plug in a USB or anything like that, can you be hacked? Can you have a virus?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's always possible with anything that has any sort of electronic component in it has the probability of being hacked on some level, whether it's self done by the person that has the arm that's like, oh hey, I want to crank it, I want to turn this up to 11.
can I overclock?
I want to overclock my arm, basically. Let's hyperthread this thing, right? But yeah, I mean, there's always that potential. When there's a will, there's a way, as we see all the time with just I work in IT, so always in the computer field. Oh, this is the most secure, blah 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 blah, whatever the case may be. Oh, well, let some 15-year-old kid with a 2 liter of Mountain Dew have about an hour in a hot spot, and guess what? You're compromised.
And I going back to Deus Ex, I think that's actually a part of it, right? In the first one, the Illuminati in the game introduce a virus to all augmented people, and they actually shut down, like physically shut down everybody that has augmentations in them, because their idea is that they want to take the human race back to being pure and just human 100%.
And then you got to ask yourself at that, like you got Mr. Joe Stone, a police officer who just traded in his arms, and possibly military too. Now all of you are compromised.
Yeah.
So, is it really a smart idea?
Well, to your point, Bub, I think MJ just hit it pretty good. It's like the governor in the car. You can remove it in the same way that you could in a car, right? So, like, even if there was federal regulations or stipulations on max strength, there's always going to be the law-abiding citizen, right? You're always going to have the concealed carry person that does exactly what they're supposed to do, doesn't open fire in a crowded place, is cognizant and smart about how they carry their firearm, doesn't let people play with it, like, follows all the rules. Those aren't the guys that you're talking about in the news. The people that you're talking about in the news is always that dumbass that, I don't know, like the FBI agent that, like, his fucking firearm was loaded and he does a backflip and it falls out and shoots somebody in the leg and he walks away. Like, what the fuck, man? But unfortunately, that's the dude that's getting screen time. It's not the guys that are doing the right thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, let's see.
Well, I think circling back to one of the very first points we were talking about is, going back to the fear and how people would react to it. You got to look at what the general populace knows of an augmented person or bionic appendages would be. Mainstream media. So it's movies. Like if you look at Deadpool, Cable's in that, right?
Yep.
Saw millions of people saw it. Oh well, that's a bionic arm. Look what that can do.
Yeah, that's the normal.
So they start relating, or the video games. They see those things, or I know this is not the same vein, but kind of Terminator. I know that's cyborgs versus bionics, completely different realm, but that's what they're general populace is gonna relate it to, and that's what's they think is gonna be what it really is.
Well, I even that video with what was his name?
James Young.
James Young. Thank you. God damn. Sorry. James Young. The James Young Konami kind of deal that went down. Konami made it a part of their ad campaign for the game and that whole experience with that gentleman's bionic arm that they were going for. They put out like, what kind of tricked out features would you like to see in this arm? So if you look at the photo that was on the ad that I put up like on Twitter and all that shit, if you look at it, he's flying a drone. And that drone actually plugs into his deltoid in that bionic arm. That's where that comes from, and that's kind of how that's incorporated into everything. So I think that it's kind of a bad example because it's a case for this is the video game kind of shit that we do with a video game kind of thing. But I think that that's what just human nature is we always try to like bling everything out. I don't think it would be too far from imagination of when those knees and those joints on different artificial limbs start having spinners on them. I don't think that that would take too long for that shit to go down.
Oh my god.
What is it? Pimp my prosthetic?
Pimp my prosthetic.
You got to make it bling, son. And man,
Oh
I'd
my
have some
God.
underlights on that shit too. Like, you know it.
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
brown, baby. I got to do it. It's not my fault. It's in my DNA, baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely.
So let's see. We got another comment. What would it be? What would be a limit of people having something like this? I mean, would everyone keep that would keep everyone from cutting off their limbs off just because in order to get the. So this is going back to something we were talking about where people just willingly giving up their limbs or giving up their eyes or whatever that thing is to get that augmented, tricked out super capacity prostheses. And I think fear is a huge part of it. People are scared of shit like that. Like, you see people that go and get tattoos and piercings, or more importantly, people that don't have it. I think a lot of people are too scared to go under the needle or go under the knife for stuff. Like, people freak the fuck out. And if you're talking that I'm going to lose that hand, that's even if I'm getting a cyber one, like, I came close to losing function in my hands, and it scared the shit out of me. So what do you guys think? What would be a deterrent in that respect?
There's
Well, I agree with you. Fear. I mean, I'm not trying to get anything lobbed off unless it's an absolute necessity. Like, I don't care what the possibility, afterwards of me being pimped out prosthetic wise might be. I don't care unless it's an absolute necessity. I'm not getting that done.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I don't know where that comes from, but even like, let's say my appendix, completely useless. There's no reason for it. Like, we don't need an appendix to live, but it's mine. I want my appendix. I've kind of grown attached. We're a thing. We've been together through thick and thin. I want to keep the fucker, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So even
probably
at
use a new set of kidneys.
What?
I could probably use a new set of kidneys.
That self-inflicted fucker.
It tasted good.
Mrs. J goes back to the whole separation in society that we kind of see, and what the potentials would be later on, such as she says that she walks in the grocery store and people step to the side because she's got a full sleeve on one arm and tat's going down the majority of the other one. And she says that people get out of her way when they go in there because she's tatted up. And I think that consciously or not, you would see people react to those kind of augmentations that we're talking about. But
I would ask what kind of grocery store she's going in, because there's people all over where I'm at, tattooed, and they're like, "Yeah, what's up?" Grocery store.
I
doesn't
think
matter.
it is hugely situationally dependent, and I think with what we're talking about, commercialized prostheses, I think that in major cities and meccas and stuff like that, you would see it would have more of a level of normalcy.
Right.
Whereas, like, if you're out in rural Wisconsin, people might be taken a little bit aback.
True. So what you're saying is it all start in California first. That's where everything starts.
I'm calling New York, man. I'm calling New York, and then you
Calling
see the
New York
black
on this
market
one?
flourish in Florida.
Okay. All right.
Gotta love that black market.
Yeah, well, it's a what would you if you could do it, let's say you could walk up to MIT right this second, and you'd be like, hey, this is the dream body I've been checking out. This is kind of what I'm thinking about. I'm sick of my back hurting or my legs hurting.
I think I've had this conversation with you actually.
What would you do it? If you had the option, would you do it?
If it meant I could run again without having pain anymore.
Now, I think you need to give some context here to be fair, if you're willing to.
I was involved in a motorcycle accident a while back. I've had my left shoulder completely hold together by anchors now. I've had spinal damage and my femur has been completely replaced.
So
So,
you are augmented. You have a steel rod or titanium rod in your leg, right?
yep.
You're not fun in airports.
No, I have to get scanned a lot. In fact, I actually go through the full body scanners now.
Nice.
Because if you're ever wondering if they won't set off alarm detectors, when you got enough of it in you, it still will. And wands,
So
I set those off.
Oh man.
You were gonna say, bub? I'm sorry.
Um, I would like it in a way, but also not because whenever we're talking about augmentees and whatnot, there's always the what was once there. You still feel it. Your body cannot process that it's processing and it's gone, but it tells there's something still there, and it's extremely foreign to your body. And it's a very weird feeling to have. For an entire prosthetic limb, I don't know having experience on that one, but for me, having my femur replaced with a metal rod was a very surreal feeling because you could feel the muscle and everything else around it. You can still feel pain, but it was as if something is not there. It's a very hard, almost like an empty space, but yeah, there's matter there,
It's like
and it took a while to get used to it.
Is it kind of like similar to what a phantom limb phenomena would kind of be?
And that's
Would you
my
think,
question:
or
is would
kind
you
of
still have
equate
the
it to?
phantom pain kind of feel,
Yeah.
or phantom limbs? I hurt every time it rains. If I try running and if I hit something wrong or I go down a bump wrong, my pins go crazy and I'll have pain shoot up my legs. If you're telling me I could run and do everything with my son again and not have pain, for me personally, that'd be worth getting rid of the leg. If it's for my son, absolutely, I would replace my leg. I understand it's a part of me, but I also made a deal with my long time ago and came to terms with if I lose a limb, it is what it is.
Yeah. So what about you, bub? What do you think? What's your take?
I mean, case by case. I'm just trying to think. Like, yeah, I have a bad knee. From playing sports. Growing up and everything like that, and horribly bad ankles. Like my ankles constantly sprain. Like I just be walking, get out of bed one day and just like, yep, ankle, yep, that's gonna suck the rest of the day or week or whatever the case may be, and just deal with it. But I think there's extremes on both sides of severity. Like in Kira's case, thank you for sharing that man about yourself. I could totally see his point being valid. With his situation. For me, yeah, I have a bum knee. I have some bum ankles. But it's not to that point where I feel that I would have to, feel the need to go that route. But if the need arose, like say, I gotten some sort of weird accident or whatever the case may be, yeah, I would definitely heavily consider, some sort of bionic or prosthetic or enhanced prosthetic for myself. If it meant that I could resume normal activities that I was previously able to do.
So it comes down to a quality of life situation then. If you were,
For sure.
if your quality of life, and I think this was brought up by MJ, if your quality of life would surpass or drastically increase, then I think that that's kind of a common sense thing, right? Like I myself, I got bad knees, and it has impacted my life. And there's things that I can't do that I used to be able to do that but is it bad enough that I would be willing to lose everything below it, right? Because that's really what we're saying. It's not just that one area. We're talking about the entire kit and caboodle at that point. Everything from the lower half of my femur down would have to go. And I don't know. I think it would be crazy. And I think that that's a hard choice, and I don't know. I think you're going to get a different like a real truthful, like honest answer from me. I think it would depend on what's going on. If my knees were in serious pain and I was bitching about them all day and I was all hurt the whole day, you'd probably get a yes. If I was having a good day and everything was going all right with my knees, I'd probably be like, no, I'm good. I can suck it up.
Right.
But I think it is situation dependent, and I think it's quality of life issue. What's up, Farmageddon? And let's see, we've got Papa taking it back to, can these be weaponized? And what would it do to a place like the airport, courthouses? Is there a special law set for this? What would change with this? And I think we were talking about that a little bit ago. We were talking about different, regulations, different laws that we'd have to look at, and different, like just off the top of my head. Another one, we were talking about grip strength. Would there be like a set grip strength for augmentees? Now I could see where somebody that's like maybe sitting at a desk job and the heaviest thing that they really do all day is lift a latte, how their needs would be very different from somebody that was a farmhand prior and they got to bring in the hay at the end of the season. I could see where one would really benefit from having an increased strength and having a higher governing system as far as that went, as opposed to the other one that's maybe in a field that doesn't require that kind of that kind of exertion, I guess.
The G.I. Joe Kung Fu grip style. Got it.
Mina, I would agree. I would say that it's something that, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about is, one, creating those kind of laws and those kind of governing bodies that would have to be in charge of it. That would be, and is going to be, something that I think is going to be seriously tough, man. I wouldn't want to be on it.
Well, if you think about, circle back around to the weaponization and like kind of like the black market stuff, and that's going to go on and things like that. You look at firearms in general right now. It's not, touching back on your point, Claw, it's not the law-abiding population that you have to worry about that's gone in, passed the background checks, followed the proper channels, proper procedures, paperwork, fees, whatever, to get permitted, licensed, authorized to own, possess, or use said weapon. Go back to firearms. But all the people that haven't and have the weapons, that's the problem. Same thing could be done, I could see happening with weaponized Bionics at that point, stuff off the black market. Folks are going through illegal channels to get. That's where the issue would arise. And then what do you do at that point? We're basically back to what we're facing now with weapons and unlawful weapons.
Yeah. And
well, the
I
fear
don't know.
factor
Yeah, I don't
would
know if
create.
there's any set kind of thing. Like I think that the more that you would get into it, the more that it would like lead to the next thing that you'd have to worry about. As far as legislation, manpower, ability to check for it, ability to regulate it, ability to kind of monitor those things, the people required to do those kind of things, trained especially to interact with those kind of situations. I think that it would, one, be a flourishing market if you were in the private sector and could kind of get in on the front end of that. I think that you could really carve out a specific niche. And MJ brings up a deal of taxation and governing on that, because like let's say we'll go back and I'll say myself again. If I'm 75% like prosthetic, right, then is mandated healthcare really necessary at that point, and it becomes more of like a car tax, or
It's a good point. That's
You
a
know,
good point.
my question is, if you're that heavily prosthetic, how do they run?
What?
Like, how do you get it to operate? Are we hooking up to a neuro system or what?
Yeah, well, so a lot of the ones that I was looking at, and I know that there is a plethora. It's called the internet for a reason. It's amazing. There was so much stuff on there as far as creating specific junctions that were embedded within the tissue that allowed
Mm-hmm.
nerves to directly interface with um, computer chips and uh, with those kind of electronics straight like from tissue to mechanical portion, like without any hindrance. There was other ones where the motors had to be charged, the servos had to be charged within the prostheses um, during the night. So like just charging your cell phone, you throw the shit on the charger when you're about to crash, and then you wake up and it's good to go in the morning. So I think it kind of depends on what what it is and who did it.
Okay.
Take it off, change
I
it out
just
with
had to
your
ask that
hand.
because I'm not sure what 75% for you was. Like 75%, I'm thinking more than just limbs.
No, I'm thinking like I'm thinking limbs. So
Okay.
like arms, legs. Those are the
Okay.
big ones. As far as organs go, hell, we're growing them now. We're growing ears on rats and shit. I can.
Yeah, I saw that. That's something else.
It's crazy. Um, yeah, I think that MJ. I think your comment about the arm. I think that goes back to it'll turn into like a legislation and a regulatory deal. Like if I try to go into a place and I have to remove my arm because it doesn't pass the spec for whatever building I'm in, whether that's a school, a courthouse, or whatever. Do I check my arm and like I'm given like some crude kind of hook for X amount of time, or do I just roll without my prostheses? What kind of options would be mandated to be available in order to kind of help me out?
Well, how easy would it be to remove the arm?
Some of them, I mean, it's amazing. If you once we get done here, highly suggest anybody in the chat that you check out TED Talks Bionics, and it'll bring up a gentleman that has two prosthetic legs, and he talks about there's two different talks that he has. One of them he talks about how everybody's going to become a cyborg later on, and two, the other one he's talking about how it's actually being introduced into the market and the different technologies that are going into that. So we talked about the fabric that already has electronic components woven into it, into the fabric itself. So instead of having just like a rubber sleeve that you slide onto the limb, you slide on that special netting, and it actually increases the interface between your nerves and whatever the prosthesis is. It amplifies those signals so that your prosthetic will react accordingly. So as far as they win, it wasn't like a bunch of shit like hooked up everywhere and like cochlear implants that go straight into your brain. It was more of a surface kind of connection at the point of amputation. So as far as taking it on and off, it really wasn't that bad. It was very akin to what you see now in open market. It's just kind of like a pop on, pop off kind of situation.
Okay.
Borg. Good God. The loner arm at the door. Now, we've talked about all of those, and I'm going to bring this back to at what point do you quit being human? Because a part of being human is being finite, right? There's all sorts of fairy tales and stuff out there that talk about the fountain of youth or some kind of immortality or something like that. But if we get to the point where I can replace all my body parts with a mechanical, whatever it is, whether that's like a grown organ or whatever I need, we're crossing that threshold into my lifespan has gone from 80 to 100 years to however long I can access that technology. So we start crossing into immortality, and my question is, as human beings, are we capable of that? Are we really capable of a longer lifespan due to prosthetics, whatever that is? If it's a full cyborg kind of thing we were talking about with Ghost in the Shell, or if it's just like plug and play with my parts at that point, can the human mind really handle living for hundreds of years? Because I don't know about you guys. I've only been on this earth for 38, and it feels like a long goddamn time. And there's a lot of shit that I've already forgot.
Well, that's the. I mean, having prosthetics for your limbs, digits, whatever the case may be, is not a solution for the deceleration of brain degenerative diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that. Those still come into play. So unless they find out a way to cure those or decelerate the progression of those long term, I wouldn't see a. Yeah, you can keep changing with the times as technology improves and you get better and arms, legs, etc. But your brain at that point, you might forget how to put on your arms and legs if you have a degenerative sort of brain disease. So what good are they to you at that point?
So you're thinking nature will find a way to cull the herd.
Yeah.
Always does.
Yeah.
Always does.
I hadn't. That's a really good pick because I hadn't thought about the syphilis is another brain-eating disease that we take for granted now. But yeah, it does. It will completely destroy how your neurons fire, memory recollection, all that. And so while you might still be alive in the sense of your body still moving and stuff, you could be dead as a doornail.
Exactly.
So,
My note that I gotta throw out there is, let's say that you were able to get augmented and you have a longer lifespan. Let's say 300 years, but all your friends and family don't.
And that was another thing I was going to bring up is, do you really want to, with the thought of loss? Like, I can't remember what movie it was I watched that. I don't remember. Could have been Highlander. I don't know. I don't remember which movie it was, but it was like the character basically spoke to that, like, having this extended life is a curse because you begin to not get attached to people. You're so used to loss at that point because all your friends, family, people you hold near and dear are gone, and they'll continue. Those people that you put in those capacities that are near to you, loved ones, will continue to be gone before you are. So it's, at what point does that just kind of eat you up to a point where you're just like, I just don't want to live forever.
And then where do you lose your humanity in that?
No, I think that's great, and I think it was Highlander, and I think they talked about it in Interview with the Vampire also. I think they covered it in both. So last one that we got from MJ is, okay, so everyone nowadays wants to be a cyborg. Are their consciousness placed in a chip until it can be later downloaded into the bionic body? Just like all of the dead people who want to be unfrozen and revived later on via cryostasis. I don't think we're there tech-wise. I don't think at this point that we can effectively I don't think we can translate human thought into like data that would be transferable to another body, another host. I don't know. You're in the IT field, Bub. What do you think?
Man, that's a little deep for me, man. But I know, like, I can relate to. There's a show on Netflix called Altered Carbon, which essentially does that, except without cyborgs. They're basically taking like the suit. I think it's. I've only watched like a couple episodes. The wealthy, you have like this classes system. Like the wealthy can live forever because they can have their consciousness transplanted into different bodies continuously, and then you have folks that obviously aren't wealthy and can't do that. So Yeah, I think it's called Altered Carbon. So
Altered Carbon. Okay.
yeah, it's on Netflix. It deals with
I'm gonna
that
have to check
particular
it out.
subject. Yeah.
I'm about that.
Because I got a question for you on that one, if you don't mind. So I remember somebody telling me stranded human DNA is more than any of our like chips or anything like that can hold. So
Yep.
how would you be able to hold a mind or even a memory? Because all it is electrons and processing stored through our head. Like I don't understand all the science of it, but there's a lot of just DNA in general has more data than half of your computers out there, though.
Oh, for sure.
I think
Yeah,
it comes
that-
down to,
How would
I
you be able to
think
capture
data
that?
is data, regardless of what it is. If it's a thought pattern
Yeah,
or it's all related to a binary system, right? Zeros and ones.
but you got to have some place to store it. It's big enough.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
And
Oh,
how do you
there's got to
transport
be. There will be a new technology that's even faster than fiber optic.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen. I, just the way things
it?
go.
It's an interesting idea. And I didn't think much about it
Yeah.
until you brought it up.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it does, absolutely. But like right now, there's you can actually get what's a petabyte of storage, which is 1,000 terabytes. So if
Like,
that
how many
if that
fucking movies do you really need?
All of them.
basically, I've cataloged the internet.
No shit.
It's all
Like,
on this chart right here. No, so I mean, you have server farms out there with petabytes of storage available to them. Now, granted, they're probably more than private higher end security intel side of things that have access to those, but it's out there. It exists. It's only a matter of time before that trickles down to here's your Western Digital petabyte USB drive, but and
and I
then
think that's
when
Farm is
something
kind of
always
touched on that. He's saying that you need like a super SD card. So
Yeah,
whatever
I
that
mean-
tech would be, like you'd have that little plug and play thing. And I think they kind of get into that in Halo, right? Like Chief is plugging Cortana in the back of his Cortex, and
Right.
you have Captain Keyes, who also has, like, all ship captains have that slot, like, physically put in their head where they can plug straight into their brain and then plug that into the ship. And Big Papa, I think that's really kind of I think that's the underlying tone of what we're talking about. At what point do you cease to be human? At what point are you transcending humanness and going into a completely digital or completely different thing, outside of being just a regular human? And I don't know if we've really come up with an answer. If anything, I have shitloads of more questions than when we started this.
Yeah. Yeah, I got
Yeah, I would say same thing.
because that leads to the next question as well is when do we start saying human to evolution?
Yeah.
Is this the next evolution of humanity?
I don't, but
There, way
okay,
too many
so
questions.
okay, I'm gonna get fucking deep for a minute. So I'm sorry, like, already going out the gate. I apologize. But evolution would insinuate that it's something that happened naturally, right? Because anytime we bring up the word evolution and how that actually, the definition of that as it was kind of coined by Darwin, we're saying that it was a natural event that occurred given enough time and enough conditions to change the physicality or the condition of said species or whatever that is. Now, if we're doing something artificial where we're inducing that upon ourselves, is that really evolution? I think that a more applicable word would be transcendence at that point. Because it's not happening naturally. It's not happening in response to my physical condition. It's something that I can put upon myself in order to change my place within the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Oh,
I tried
yeah,
to throw out a
absolutely,
lot of
'cause
big, like, multisyllabic words in there. So
maybe evolution said later on I need 3 legs, but instead I decided I'm gonna be a cyborg dude.
Mhm.
Krang.
Yeah.
fucking Ninja Turtles, man. Fuck yeah. Okay.
That just
For
happened.
real's
all right.
last one, and then we're gonna be like, I could wax intellectual all night. I like to think I'm smart. I got one that says, sounds like your podcast should be 2 hours instead. I got another one that says, I feel like that wouldn't make you human anymore, but I'm just one person. But let's just say you could put a human mind into a chip. Could one body have 2 chips with one mind in each? Ooh.
A man with 2 souls.
Yeah, so it would be like, ooh. That, no.
Then who would... There'd be 2 consciences in one body. Would the consciences intertwine, or would they constantly fight over control?
And would one be able to take control over the weaker one?
Yeah. No, like, wow.
Push it out.
Like, pop a hat off to you, man. I'm ready. Wow.
That was good.
That's solid, dude. That's solid. I don't know, because you kind of see... the quickest kind of variation that I can think of to that would be Voltron, right? Now, bear with me. I know it's kind of a weird thing, but stick with me for a second. So essentially, Voltron is one body, right? But it's 5 different individuals that make up, control, and are in possession of that one being, right? Mm-hmm. So it would almost be...
they're in control of their particular appendage,
right?
Anyway, continue on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. So no, that's exactly what my case is, though, is they're in control of their certain appendage, but once they form Voltron and enter that one being, then it's shared, right? Because they usually enter the same control room kind of thing, however the fuck that works out mechanically, but whatever. But they enter one control room, but they're still all in control, and they have to work in symbiosis at that point in order to be able to get it to function properly. I think that humans suck. This would be my hip shot answer. I think humans suck, and I think if you tried to share a body, you'd end up killing yourself too quick. Because everybody would want to be in control. I think we should breathe this fast. No, I think we should do this. I want to sleep. I want to go for a run. Fuck you. No, fuck you. And I think it would just, I think it's probably out of control. That's my take. That's my take. What do you
I don't think humans could be a hive mind.
No.
Flood?
No.
Like, machine? Absolutely. Machine could be a hive mind, but a human? No.
I don't know. I think it's weird. But I would love to do I'm going to start doing Tuesdays again, and I will try to kidnap more people into the thing that I call thought, even though it ends up turning into I have more questions at the end. So I don't know. I think it's just seeking truth to get all Socratic on it for a minute. I think I don't have the right answers, and I don't know if too many people out in the world do, but I love talking about it because it makes me think. And I think we don't do enough of that. I think we get caught up in our Twitter feeds too much, and we let other people tell us what our truth is. And I sincerely appreciate you guys coming out tonight. Bub?
Yeah, man.
Kira?
Yeah, man.
Make sure that you hit those guys up in the chat and you give them a follow and you show them some love. They are streamers here on this wonderful platform that we call Mixer, and they're okay peeps. They're okay peeps.
Okay.
So let me shout you out here real quick, Kira, because that wasn't built in my deal.
I'm actually locked in the trunk of his car right now, so...
That's why it's so dark.
I threw fucking hot dogs in there. Shut up.
I want s'mores.
I gave you a damn Lunchable. You're good to go for weeks.
But I really do. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me and listening to my crazy, and I love hearing your crazy too. So
it's good times, man.
Maybe we can do some shit in the future. I'd be about that life. So I guess wrap up. I'm DS Claude. We've been doing this for Team F.I.N.O. Thank you for hanging out with us. I hope to see you guys in the future. And if not, that's okay too. I still heart you. So talk to you later. Take it easy. Bye-bye.